Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, welcome. Normally, I introduce the guest speaker. Today, we're going to do it a little bit differently. It's the last time we had somebody else introduce a guest speaker. We ended up having him coming back to speak as the actual guest of honor, and that was Byron Spruill. So I guess it might work out well if you introduce people for your future. But today, our guest speaker is Kim Jeffery, but his son, Will, is also a student here at the University of Notre Dame. He's in the College of Science. He's a science business student. So as I just told him, my son, the dean's daughter, there's a few of us that have kids in this college here, work in this college that had sons and daughters that went that route. But he's going to come up, and we're going to have him introduce his father today. This way he can give us the real, true skinny here, not the glorified stuff I always give. But anyways, I'd like to give a welcome to Will Jeffery so he can introduce his father.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing this morning's speaker and my dad, Kim Jeffery. I will not be shedding too much light on the dirt of him. I'll just be giving you what he wants me to say. Kim Jeffery is the retired chairman and CEO of Nestlé Waters North America, the leading bottled water company in North America, and the third largest non-alcoholic beverage company in America. Nestlé Waters owns 7 of the top 10 bottled water brands, as well as Perrier and San Pellegrino, and had sales of $4.7 billion and 8,000 employees at the time of his retirement in 2014. He has over 45 years of experience in all facets of the consumer products industry, including sales, marketing, mergers and acquisitions, manufacturing, logistics, sustainability, and finance. Additionally, he skillfully managed the journey from entrepreneurial startup to multi-billion-dollar market leader by focusing on organizational development and utilizing a values-based leadership model, which created a high-performance culture. Kim became CEO in 1992 and stayed in that position until 2013, at which point he became non-executive chairman. During his tenure, Nestlé Waters grew from $650 million in revenue and a 24% share of the category to $4.7 billion and a 40% share of category. Over 90% of that growth was organic. Nestlé Waters, under his leadership, pioneered the bottled water industry in America and was responsible for the category's ascendance to the #1 most consumed beverage in America. Utilizing vertical integration in manufacturing and self-manufacturing of packaging, hybrid distribution, high-speed manufacturing, and highly efficient logistics, Nestlé Waters developed a disruptive business model which was much lower cost than traditional beverage manufacturing and distribution. Coupled with the belief that people and the level of their commitment matters, Nestlé Waters became the fastest growing beverage company in America for the 15 years between 1995 and 2010. Kim retired in early 2014, and he currently serves on the boards of Kendall Jackson Family Wineries, Pratt Vissey Industries based in Melbourne, Australia, Carbon Light Industries, and Stu Leonard's Markets. Additionally, he is an advisor to private equity firm North Castle Partners and serves as chairman of one of their portfolio companies, Sprout Foods. Kim also serves on the boards of Keep America Beautiful and Reach Prep, and he and his wife, Mary, both serve on the Leadership Council of AmeriCares. Kim and Mary live in Greenwich, Connecticut with their 4 children, myself included. Growing up, I have had the pleasure of not only being part of America's most hydrated family, but I've also been able to witness his experience and wisdom firsthand. This morning, he is here to share some of that wisdom with all of you. Without further delay, the legend himself.
Thanks, Will. Good morning, everybody. I feel a little bit like a priest in church. It's like nobody wants to get too close to the preaching, I'm thinking. I have half a mind to call everybody down here to the front so we could all get acquainted, but we're going to have to do it from a distance. I appreciate the fact that you're a captive. There's only one person here I know that's not a captive audience this morning. She's here of her own volition. The rest of you have to be here, so I hope I'm not going to waste your time. First thing I have to say is I love this university. I said this morning to another group, my daughter missed the off-ramp for Notre Dame and went to BC. But She made her own decision. So, but at least I got one in the fold here. My other two at home are probably going to go someplace else. Not because they wouldn't like to come here; they love it here. But they've got to pick it up a couple notches if they want to come here. Will is I'm very proud of him. He's both science and business here. He's also in an ROTC unit in school here, and he loves that part of this life also. This morning, I'm going to give you a Cliff's Notes version of something which was actually the hardest thing I ever did during a 40-year business career. And because the Q&A is always the best part of what I do, I'm going to try to do it quickly and try not to digress too much during my speaking to you. I want to have plenty of time to talk about what I think will make or break your careers. And it's not the courses you're taking right now. In all due respect to the faculty, there's other things involved in your future success, and we'll talk about them. In speaking, I call myself a three-trick pony. I speak on three topics a lot. Sustainability, because I have a little PhD, an unofficial PhD in sustainability, because we were attacked by pseudo-environmentalists early part of the 21st century. I speak about leadership because I had to recast the culture of our company, and we'll talk about that. And I have a little mini PhD in crisis management as well, because we almost went out of business a couple of times during my career very long career with this company. I've been up to my neck in all three of those things at various times. So during the Q&A, everything is open for business. We can talk about anything you want to. And if you can't contain yourself, it's okay to interrupt me with a question. Finally, since my kids make fun of me all the time, it's okay for you guys to make fun of me also. And I don't want you to be shy in the question department. I'm user-friendly. I think there's a lot of good stuff here that we will talk about, and other things that we can talk about. So let's go. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about me, a little bit about the company, and then I'm going to talk to you about leadership and my experiences with my hands on the steering wheel, not fake stuff. I'm sitting here looking at this Dasani bottle right now, and it's making me crazy. But my early life, I grew up in suburban Chicago. The single mom raised myself, my brother, and my sister from the time. My sister was 4, I was 5, and my brother was 10. I went to college about 90 miles down the road at a little small independent college, liberal arts school called Hillsdale College in the middle of no place in farming community in Michigan, one of the poorest farming communities in the state. After college, I went to work for Kraft Foods for 4 years, and then I went to work for Pepsi for 4 years. And as I said to I did this earlier today with a group of executive MBA students. I said I finally got out of prison after 8 years with those two companies, and I went to do something fun in an entrepreneurial environment. I joined a company called Great Waters of France that was put in business to do nothing but import and sell Perrier in the United States. We had 30 people in the company and $20 million in revenue when I joined it in 1978, and I spent my next 35 years in that company helping to build it. 33 of those years in senior executive roles from the time I was 32 years old on. The company was very small when I joined it, very entrepreneurial, a lot of doubt as to whether it would even be successful. It's 1978. Nobody thought anybody was going to pay 79 cents for a bottle of water, and my friends at Pepsi thought I was out of my mind to leave and go there. In retrospect, obviously, success is the best revenge, and they wish they were me about 25 years later. During the years of 78 to 92, we grew from 30 million to 600 million, purchasing old, beat-up spring water brands in North America that your parents and grandparents might have known about. No matter where you live in the United States, you've had intersection with one of our brands. If you're in the West Coast, it's Arrowhead. If you're in Texas, it's Ozarka. If you're in the Midwest, it's Ice Mountain. If you're in Florida, it's a brand called Zephyr Hills. If you live in the Mid-Atlantic, it's Deer Park, and in the Northeast, it's Poland Spring. We acquired all those brands for almost nothing. And in those days, we bought what we could service the debt on. They're all leaders in their geographic regions. And then I threw on top of that a national brand that I developed in 2002 called Nestlé Pure Life, which is now from nothing $1 billion brand as well. Just so you guys know, between Coke and Pepsi together, they have combined 20% share of the bottled water category versus what we had as 40 when I retired. They're the college campus water primarily because they bundle other soft drink brands together, and the guys who do the procurement don't know what this really costs them. If they unbundled their brands and they bought water separately, they'd save a lot of money, but then Coke and Pepsi would say, yeah, but then we're not going to give you a discount on the other stuff, which is a lie, because then you just say, if you're a procurement guy, okay, in that case, Coke, I'm going to go talk to Pepsi. And they say, okay, we'll give it to you. But the sales process is a little challenging. From 92 to 2014, after Nestlé purchased our company, basically in a hostile takeover. And they bought the French company, which was an old line bottled water company that had all the major brands in France and owned half of San Pellegrino even in those days. And Nestlé bought that company not knowing what they bought in the United States. It turned out if they hadn't bought the United States company along with it, they would have had to take a write-down on their entire purchase because the European brands didn't do very well over the next 25 years. We grew from 650, as Will said, to 4.7 billion when I retired, 30 manufacturing facilities, and between 2001 and 2010, we built 15 plants, and these plants are like breweries, 750,000 square feet sitting on top of huge spring sources and satellite springs around those plants as well. The year I left, we did self-manufacture of all of our own packaging, still do. The year I left, we made and filled 23 billion bottles of water. We had 100 facilities around the United States, 8,000 employees, fundamentally two businesses. One was called our home and office delivery business, where we deliver 5-gallon waters to homes and offices, 1.4 million customers, 2,000 of our own route trucks, doing 6 million deliveries a year, and even with a 97%, 98% on-time rate, still getting 15,000 phone calls a day from people who aren't very happy with you. It's totally a service-driven business. The other part of that was $750 million. The rest of the $4.7 billion is in retail products sold through supermarkets, drug chains, you name it. Any channel that's out there is even Home Depot and Lowe's selling bottled water today. We became the third largest non-alcoholic beverage company in America, and because of our success and our vision in the early days, bottled water became the #1 beverage in America in 2016, eclipsing soft drinks for the first time. I have a couple of stunning data points for you. Soft drinks in the last 25 years, or 20 years, have lost 25% of their volume. 70% of that has gone to carbonated or to bottled water. But to put this in perspective, beverage consumption in America is just like a big pie. Except for population growth, it's not growing because humans can only ingest so much liquid each day. The exception being you guys on Friday or Saturday night. So if somebody's winning in this pie, somebody's losing. The guy that was losing was carbonated soft drinks. 20 years ago, the per capita consumption of soft drinks in America was 54 gallons for each man, woman, and child in the United States. That's how big the soft drink business got. Last year, it was 39 gallons. For the first time in history, bottled water eclipsed carbonated soft drinks. But I got to tell you, 39 gallons per capita is still a hell of a lot of carbonated soft drinks for every man, woman, and child. Now, 25% of that's diet soft drinks, but 75% of it is sugar. And diet soft drinks have their own problems because no matter what science says, people have convinced themselves that artificial sweeteners are not good for you, and there's nothing these guys can do about it right now. So people would always ask me, how big is bottled water going to be? And I say, well, I can tell you the answer to that if you can tell me how small soft drinks are going to be, because that's the source of our consumption. And in the last 15 years, every man, woman, and child has saved 15 pounds worth of calories from the decline of soft drinks. It's incredible numbers. So, okay, so that's the background of what I did in a short version. Right now, I'd like to go back to 2001 and tell you a story. In 2001, after 8 years of tenure as the CEO of Nestlé Waters North America, we faced a fight for survival because Coke and Pepsi decided to try to become the dominant players in bottled water. We had quite a head start on them, as I've told you already, but these are two very big, powerful companies. They were determined to heavily investment spend. Their organizations had thousands of trucks, sales reps, and thousands of sales reps also, and covered 1 million accounts, each one of them, with a direct store delivery model. DSD it's called, direct to store delivery model, where their trucks pull up to the account and drop off a hand truck full of whatever it is to each and every account. I can't even remember the number, and I didn't research it well enough, but we were somewhere between 1 billion and 1.5 billion in 2001 in revenue, so we were still pretty small. We were the profit engine for the global water business at that time. By that time, we were 50% of the global water business for Nestlé, and we were about 70% of the profits. We were asking our parent company for $300 to $600 million every single year to build plants because our business was growing so fast. And I was not going to ask for profit relief because of our position in the company. And the other reason I wasn't going to ask is because they weren't going to give me a hall pass to not deliver the profitability. So having no choice, we cut $100 million in overheads. We reduced our general and administrative expenses. We froze salaries. Now, for our salaried people, we froze salaries. That was only $7 million. It was a totally symbolic, burning platform thing that I did to get everybody focused on the fact that we were going to have a big fight with the two big coal companies. We reinvested that $100 million in promotion depth and promotion frequency. We invested an incremental $30 million in measured media to match the Coke and Pepsi brands, Dasani and Aquafina, which are not spring water, they're just processed municipal water, by the way. And we introduced lean manufacturing, which, while not paying off for us right away, was the way we continued to lower our cost of manufacturing over the next 10 years. Okay, so how did we do? We grew 15% in 2002. We gained 4.5 market share points. We beat our profit goals by the metric I call 50 basis points. For those of you who don't know what a basis point is, it's 0.5% of profitability. And most of all, we served notice to Coke and Pepsi that we would be tough competitors and that they needed to respect us. So when we did this, going into it, I wasn't sure whether we would win or not. I had my doubts. It was a very scary time for all of us in the company. I had presented at a beverage conference for the first time that year, and the guy in front of me was a guy named Craig Weatherup, who was the CEO of the Pepsi-Cola Bottling Network. And he got up and said, "We are going to own the bottled water category in 2 years." And I followed him up on the stage, and I said, "Well, I don't know whether to just fold up my tent and go home or whether to do the presentation." And I got a big laugh from it, but then I said, "Look, there's no way that we're going to lose," and my bravado was speaking volumes with a very uncertain person behind speaking. So how did David beat Goliath? Because that's really what it was. Now, this is my story. By 2002, we developed a very strong culture which embraced trust in one another, teamwork, collaboration, a strong bias for personal accountability, respect for our leaders, and a very simple belief in the concept of we versus me, which is a very powerful competitive weapon. The foundation of our success was a values-based leadership model, which basically flips the pyramid upside down, and the leaders at the bottom become the servants of the people at the top. Over the 7 years between 1994 and 2001, we built the model, and we practiced every day to get good enough to achieve stellar performance from our employees when it really mattered. And I'll give you more on that in a few minutes. But I want to go back even further now to 1993. 1 year after I took over as CEO, I had a leadership epiphany. I was personally unhappy in my life. Be happy to talk to you about that too if any of you need counseling. I had inherited a dysfunctional executive team from my predecessor, defensive about their own functions, working in their own self-interest, and disconnected from their teammates. We stood for nothing. We had no overarching vision. And our mission statement, which we created in a vacuum in an executive team room that we put up on every wall of the company, was meaningless because we weren't living up to it. We were telling our people to do one thing and then doing ourselves something different. It's like, okay, we got this mission statement all done. Let's put it up on the wall. It looks terrific. Okay, we can go back to behaving badly now. You're supposed to laugh, but maybe it's not that funny to you. This was a very humbling time for me because after 15 years at the company in leadership roles, I couldn't blame it on anyone else. There was no previous administration. I was the administration. I literally woke up at the age of 45 and realized that I had been managing instead of leading. And there's a leadership guru who's passed away a few years ago at USC named Warren Bennis, a very famous guy, who defined leadership in this way. He said, managers do things right and leaders do the right thing. It's oversimplified by a lot, but it's a difference between hiring for skills and hiring for character. Through doing some reading, I stumbled on the concept that there are two types of companies, technology-based and human assets-based. So let's think about a technology-based company might be an Intel, who can leapfrog their competitors by having some unbelievable scientist who creates a new chip that runs faster than anything else on the market. The rest of the companies out there are human assets-based companies, and the ultimate human assets-based company would be a advertising agency. And every day, the assets of that company go up and down in the elevator, and they're free to choose what they want to do. Notre Dame is a human assets-based company. If they don't deliver high-quality education, they're not going to be able to attract the kind of kids that they attract today. So here's the point of this. In human assets-based companies, you win with people, their passion, and commitment. A human assets-based company doesn't do anything different than anybody else can do. If I have a company with great plants and great trucks and a great marketing strategy and all that hoopla, it doesn't make a difference if I don't have quality people to execute for me every single day. And almost every company in America at some level is a human assets-based company. And if you believe this, and I do, and I've validated the principle over the last 20 years, you have to ask yourself, am I creating the kind of environment which inspires loyalty, passion, and commitment? And in my case, the answer was no. For the executive MBA guys this morning, half the answers were no. One guy said to me, well, we're redoing our culture. We had the top 3 people leave. I said, were they any good? He said, no. And typically, we like our jobs. I never find people that don't like their jobs. What they tend to not like in companies that don't have good culture is the people they work for and work with. So it forced me to look at myself and everything around me, and here's what I saw. A lot of good people, a lot of people who displayed situational values because nobody told them what they're supposed to be doing, and some people simply behaving badly. So I think about it as a green light, yellow light, red light situation. And it's green light, you know you're good to go. Yellow light, decision-making and behavior, I better think about this before I do something, but you might do the right thing, you might go through the light, and you might stop. But it's situational values if you apply it to decision-making. And then there's the red light, where everybody knows that they're supposed to stop, but some people just can't. So in my company in 1993, traffic was moving. Everybody was going. But at least 2 of the lights shouldn't have been. And every single day, you guys are going to be faced with decisions to make, and you have to ask yourself, am I going to make the right one? Or am I going to cut the corner and make the other one? And too often in our society, we find default in our leaders. So, basically, I was getting what I deserved in a culture at that point. We were about a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10. We had no context for desired behavior. We had no clear statement about what we valued. We had no written or spoken boundaries. We had leaders saying one thing and doing another one. And we had a command and control leadership model, which is basically, hey, it's my way or the highway. Just do it. Don't ask me any questions about it. Just do it. So what did I do? I almost didn't know where to start, but here's what I did. I trashed a speech I had for 150 of our top employees that was for a national meeting we were conducting down in Dallas, Texas, and on the plane ride down, I just wrote out a new speech. And I got in front of 150 of our leaders in January of 1994, and I told them that for the remainder of my career, that I was going to live in the service of them, putting them first, and that I was going to try to make our company, a great place for people to work. And I was going to try to provide them with inspirational leadership, myself included, and that I wanted their help. Well, you know, I had a bunch of people who didn't know what the hell to do after I said that. So after making this pronouncement, I had to act. And to do this, I had to set boundaries of acceptable behavior and expected behavior. This meant telling people what would be rewarded and what would be punished. Rewarded behaviors were respect for people, teamwork, collaboration, communication, integrity, honesty, empathy, and humility. Punished behaviors were putting yourself ahead of others or your team if you were a leader, getting good results with bad values, bullying, talking down to people publicly, hubris, arrogance, lying, cheating, and stealing, and 100 other things. And believe me, I saw all of them in the first few years. We created context for what we wanted, how we wanted people to behave by discussing openly transgressions that, and what should have happened and what did happen. Early on, I would pull case studies every single year for about 4 or 5 years out of the stupid file of decisions that we made or behaviors that were unacceptable in the company and what happened from them. Too often in the early days, we still continued to tolerate this kind of behavior. But I would have breakout sessions at every one of our national meetings. I'd take 5 different groups, put them in a room, and we'd go over these case studies and we'd discuss what the right decision and the wrong decision would have been. And believe me, this was not easy. It took a while. I used these as teaching moments on what we should have done. And I explained that every time we failed to take the right action, we were disrespecting the 95% of people who are coming to work trying to do the right thing every day. Knowingly failing to act or ignorance sends the message to your employees that you don't care or you don't know, and both of these are unacceptable. I fired many people in the early years who either couldn't or wouldn't buy in to our values-based leadership model. The framework for this model is something I called our aspirations and beliefs, which became known as our A's and B's. Our aspirations were who we wanted to be, an overarching vision that was larger than any one of us. It was intended to create a we mentality instead of a me mentality. And then our beliefs were how we were going to interact with each other every day. Basically, it was integrity, respect, empathy, humility, tolerance, teamwork, and building relationships at the heart and not the head level, which I will talk about shortly. It was a very simple, it wasn't on a wall anywhere. I didn't even write it down for a year. I refused to write it down because I was so embarrassed with the other one that we had done. But finally, people said to me, we need to write it down. We need you to write it down because we want to talk to our teams about it. So it was very simple. Our aspiration was to aspire to be the best company in the beverage industry. We'll do this by building customer loyalty, inspiring employee passion and commitment, consistently achieving our key business objectives, acting with an entrepreneurial company spirit, and constantly improving our company and ourselves. And our beliefs, it's like, okay, what did I learn from my parents if I had good parents? What did I learn in Sunday school? What did I learn from the role models that I had growing up? We believe in respect for people, community, and environment, honesty, integrity, and teamwork. Pretty simple stuff. And then I had 6 core corporate strategies that if you want to hear them later, we can, which guided us for at least 10 to 15 years. I didn't change them. So everybody knew what they were. You didn't have to worry about a new set of objectives every year because these were the long-term strategies. And at the top, I just mentioned the top one because it's the most important, it was to defend and grow market share. Market share is like an EKG. It tells you how healthy your brand and your company is. If you're losing market share, you got going out of business strategy. So you grow and you gain and you put that at the top of your list. But you don't beat your people up every day to get that market share. You create the environment for them to be successful by letting them know that you care about them. I have a friend who used to say, the beatings will continue until morale improves. And many, many companies operate that way today, especially with quarterly profits being so important to companies. So it slowly became second nature for us to follow through and treat people consistently against our framework, regardless of your position. This developed trust in our employees that we would do the right thing. And once this kicked in, we were on our way. So I'm getting close to the end here so we can have Q&A time. I want to tell you what values-based leadership is to me, and I'll give you what I think. There's lots of definitions of leadership, but I think this is a really good one. Leadership is being able to role model the kind of behaviors that inspire people to be invested in your vision and your mission, whatever it might be. I can tell you that people everywhere are hungry for inspired leadership, and it's very powerful. When was the last time you heard a politician in America apologize for anything? How often do you see people default and you shake your head and say, that's not the right thing? Because we're so used to a lack of inspiration, our ears are highly attuned to the BS meter. We smell it a mile away. And you can't fake what I'm talking about right now. I'll say it again. It's about character, honesty, integrity, empathy, humility, collaborative cooperation, and large doses of communication to your employees so that they feel valued by what they're doing. It requires introspection and self-awareness on the part of everyone, but especially leaders. You have to be willing to put your behavior under a microscope every day. Look at yourself in the mirror, and in some cases, change. In all cases, because we're human and we make mistakes, we need to set a higher standard for ourselves. And when we make mistakes, we have to apologize for those mistakes. I told my people time and time again, if I can apologize, you guys can apologize too. And there are times when I've had to apologize as well. It's about creating consistency so that everybody knows what's going to be valued inside the four walls of your business. The culture that I inherited and by neglect helped build was like playing baseball on a football diamond. People were out of bounds all day long because we hadn't told them what was going to be rewarded and what was going to be punished. But lest you think this is a soft thing, values-based leadership is not soft because every business and every activity needs accountability from the people that are participating in whatever it is you're doing. It's about being able to also have the tough discussions sometimes, but it means taking a real interest in your employees, their lives, their families, their aspirations. This is the essence of building relationships at the heart level. Relationships at the heart level are you passing somebody in a hallway if you're working and somebody says to you, hey, how you doing today? And like maybe you had a really bad day and you need to talk to somebody, but nobody's waiting around for you to tell them anything other than, hey, I'm great, Ralph, how are you? Or how about those Mets last night? That would be a stretch. But at any rate, it's actually taking the time to get close to people. In our church, when we greet each other in a sign of friendship, you're shaking the hands with about 3 people around you. I went to the milkshake mass last night. It took 5 minutes for everybody to make the rounds in the room to hug their friends. And even sometimes it might not have even been a friend. And that's what I'm talking about at relationships at the heart level. So this relationship at the heart level thing is important because sometimes people fire themselves. Sometimes they aren't doing the right thing. And sometimes you have to have a hard conversation with people, and they may not be able to stay in the company. But it doesn't mean you don't care about them. And if people know that you care, they know feedback isn't personal, and you'd be amazed at how honest you can be with people when they know you really care about them. And I think it's a terrific leadership model. I've had people tell me, I don't want to get too close to my employees because I might have to fire them someday. That's about the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. There's one other one too, which is, I don't care if people like me as long as they respect me. Honestly, how many people do you respect that you don't like? These are not mutually exclusive ideas here. And any executive that thinks that's a good idea is completely devoid of any self-awareness. So if you want to have instinctively good behavior, you have to set up the kind of environment where people can practice and develop the right kinds of behavioral habit patterns. We use something called a 360-degree evaluation. How many of you have heard of that? It's a fantastic tool because what it means is 360 means people above you, alongside of you, and below you are evaluating you versus one HR evaluation between you and your subordinate. And if you get a lousy performance evaluation, you may just go home and think you got a personality conflict with the boss, that everything's okay with you. If you're getting evaluated 360, you cannot hide. It's going to be out there. I was the first one to take one in our company in 1993, and I have to be honest with you, it wasn't great. But 10 years later, I went to the London Business School and had to fill one out for the school, and it was their own deal. And they got it, and when I got there, they told me they'd never seen one like that, and they were afraid that I was going to ruin the classes by being Mr. Know-It-All, and I wasn't. I was actually humbled by having gotten it, because that was my goal. This is a perverse tool, because if you're not a self-aware person, you can use it to hunt down the people who you think gave you a lousy evaluation, and you can fire them. Or you can begin your leadership journey by internalizing the feedback and vowing to do better. The first time we did it, we told people they didn't have to share it with their employees. The second year, we told them they had to, or that we wanted them to, and the third year, they had to. You cannot believe how many times the dog ate the homework before it got to their employees. Those people ultimately were hiding out, and you can't. And most of them couldn't work here anymore. We ultimately went 2,000 deep out of our 8,000 employees. That was our white-collar salaried employee group. And the 360s were geared to the behaviors and the values we wanted to see in our employees. And this is the vehicle that became the way we practiced and got better. Our success ultimately was an output of creating an emotionally connected group of people who took personal accountability, meaning they wanted to be accountable. How many times have you had somebody say, well, I'm going to hold you accountable for that? If I have a relationship with you where I have to hold you accountable for anything, I've got the wrong relationship with you. I wanted people working for me who wanted to be accountable. And they wanted to be accountable in my environment because they didn't want to let their teammates down. They embraced the idea of we versus me, working for something larger than themselves. And I tell you, if it's we instead of me, everybody has a chance to win. In the me environment, some people win and some people lose, and that does not make a connected culture. Finally, there are two things that are culture killers. People see and hear everything. As I said earlier, they expect and are looking for default. The gap between what you and your leaders say and what they do is the difference between inspiring people and having them be cynics about the culture they're operating in. The gap between what you say and what you do has to be big enough for a gnat to get through. When it's big enough to drive a truck through, you lose the energy of your people, or they leave and go do something else. I can give you a bunch of examples of that as we talk later. Some of them are too personal, but we'll talk about them. my old company's going the wrong way right now. Disruptive personalities and anyone who gets good results with bad values must be removed if you want to gain people's trust. As I said earlier, if you don't act, your team is going to think that you don't know or don't care, and both of these are not flattering results. Many people, and I got this question earlier this morning about how do you manage having a good culture with the needs of answering the bell every quarter on your financial results if you're a company. Which one do you worry about? I'm living proof that you can not worry about the top and bottom line, but if you worry about the people, you're going to get outstanding results. In 22 years of leading my company, I missed my profit plan twice, 2008 and 2009. And those were years when most of my friends were losing their jobs, and my next door neighbor, Dick Fold, lost his company. I actually got this question this morning. Who said, he said, he was a professor somewhere. I don't know what he was doing in that class, but he said to me that he said, what do you think about a professor who thinks that people don't matter? And I'm going like, are you kidding me? When do people not matter? That's the first thing we're supposed to do here. And it was just, I just couldn't believe it. But so what I was going to say was many people have been successful as either entrepreneurs or executives, but our metrics tend to be top line and bottom line. And held up against the prism of values-based leadership, I can just about guarantee you, and what is required to achieve it, I can guarantee you that none of us are as good as we think we are. I truly believe that the top line and the bottom line would take care of themselves if I was successful on the cultural journey that I took my company on. And I'm living proof that it works. So in closing, I just want to say this, that if people like what they're doing, and more importantly, who they're doing it for, you can get superior performance from them. If you don't get this simple concept right, your people will lie down or leave. And the essence of values-based leadership is contained in this point of, I don't care if people like me as long as they respect me. That's just not it. And if you don't get that right, you lose the heart and soul of your people to want to be invested in your mission. When I was, one last thought, when I was 6 years old, it's now 63 years ago, I'm ashamed to say, my first grade teacher wrote on my manila report card, plays well with others. And I still think that's a pretty good concept today. And that's about the best thing that somebody could say to you, and I got it when I was 6. Now, in fairness, she also said, easily, let's see, what did she say? Easily distracted. That's the part of my brain that goes off to another space when I may be talking to somebody. But I really think that one of the things I like about coming here, talk to you folks about it, is because I see it here. And this what we're talking about here, you guys know IQ and EQ? We are totally talking about EQ today. And that's not a grade. It's only a grade that comes from self-awareness and working on building your relationships with others being of high character, and being a good teammate to people. Thanks for being patient and letting me share this with you this morning, and I'd love to take some questions. Thanks. Go ahead. Anybody? Let's get started here. You don't have to do the first one, Michael. Somebody. Thanks. I know you do that. But I do. I know. She's up here.
Hi, thank you for
Hi.
being here today. For all the students, as we move forward in the whole job searching experience, what would you say are some of the most important values or forms of advice to look for in a company, the company culture, as we move forward?
You know, sometimes people are, could you just get a little farther away from the microphone and say it again? I lost a
Yes,
little
sure.
bit of it.
For all the students, as we move forward in the job searching experience, what would you say are some of the most important values, forms of advice to look for in a company, the company culture?
Uh, Most of the kids that I counsel a bunch of them because my friends have kids that are out in the workforce, a lot of them, and the kids don't want to listen to their parents, so they send them to me. Most of the kids I encounter today really don't like working in the big companies because they see cultural defaults and they see more of a less of an opportunity to see more of what's going on in the business. The greatest gift I got was joining a small company where I was involved in doing everything. But relative to values, I'd say this. Most kids are so happy to get a job that they're not thinking about what it's going to be like working in there. And when I used to see people in our company, I would say, interview, interview, interview. Talk to a lot of people and ask them, you kids need to learn one thing in interviewing, and that is, don't just sit there and get interviewed answering yes and no. Be thinking about what you want to ask them, and be thinking about turning the conversation to the things that you want to talk about. These are stressful environments for you to be in, but you need to interview them just as much as they're interviewing you. Otherwise, you're going to be gone in 2 years, and you do not want 15 things on your resume by the time you're 40 years old. You want to make the right choices. So in our company, I can remember one instance when we were interviewing somebody, and he said to one of the guys that ran one of the divisions for me, he said, "Jesus, I've been here 6 times. When are you going to hire me?" And he looked at me and he said, "Look, I didn't marry my wife on the first date, and I'm not hiring you until I'm sure about you either." So the way that we ended up getting good people is we kept interviewing, and we wanted to know who these people were. I don't ask people about skills. I want to know their story. I want to know who their mom and dad was. I want to know what they did for a living. I want to know how many siblings are in the family. I want to know what you did in your summers. I want to know examples of showing the right kind of values. And you need to be doing the same thing at those companies. And what I used to tell people interviewing in our company is, I said, if you don't hear a consistent story of what it's like to work here, head for the door. Culture is like a river. If the river is moving smoothly downstream and you're paddling along, everything's great. But if you've got whirlpools all around the side of your river, it's like having whirlpools around the side of your culture. And invariably, you're going to have things that are not going to be right or to your liking in those companies. And I will tell you right now, nothing is perfect. There is no perfection. We were not perfect. We made mistakes all the time, and every single year. Just the birds and the bees alone in the springtime caused enough trouble in our company that some people had to not be there anymore. It's human nature, but you need to try, and you need to have top leadership that understands what their obligation to people is. As leaders, we have a moral obligation to the people who've entrusted their careers to us to take care of them and make sure that they have a good career and get the things they're aspiring to, and we have to help them get there. And some people think because I'm a leader or I'm a manager or something that I can treat my people like, I won't use the word, because my son's here and my wife doesn't like me swearing when I'm speechifying. So that's what I tell you. Make sure, do your homework. Don't just be so excited that somebody wants you. Make sure you want them.
Hi. You mentioned about onslaught from Pepsi and Coke. What were the biggest threats and how did you tackle them?
Let's do this close up.
Yeah, so you mentioned about onslaught from Pepsi and Coke.
Yeah.
So what were the biggest threats from them and how did you tackle them?
Well, they
And
kept.
secondly,
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay. Oh, there's more.
Yeah. So was there poaching from them on a human capital, which you are
Poaching from us?
for poaching from them?
No, I didn't want any of them. I worked there.
Okay.
I will. I don't care. I don't care I don't care if there's somebody whose parent, any of your parents work for PepsiCo here? Okay. Worst culture I've ever seen.
Okay. And lastly, you mentioned about two.
So I hired a number of people from them,
Right. Okay.
but I didn't poach.
No, I
We
was-
hired people who wanted to leave, and then I was a tough interview for Pepsi people because in Pepsi, you could be all form and no substance. If you look good and you talk good, you could go pretty far in that company. I was there. I had a nice little 4-year career with them, but it wasn't what I wanted.
Okay. Lastly, I mean, you mentioned about two downturns in your entire career.
Mention what?
Two downturns, or twice you were out of business.
Yeah,
something
twice
like
we
that.
almost went out of business.
So what were those situations, and how did you manage that?
One was at the age of 32, I had good news and bad news. I was promoted to vice president of sales in a $50 million company. That was the good news. The bad news, we were insolvent. The team before us that created the opportunity for me to come east from California was that the company sold $50 million worth of Perrier and lost $15 million. And the P&L is a short one. We didn't manufacture the product. We just imported it, and we got to the docks in New York, and then we had to manage a half a P&L. And invariably what happened was the CEO of the company thought we'd sell $100 million worth of Perrier, and we sold $50 million worth of Perrier, but he spent like we were going to sell $100 million, and we lost $15 million, so he lost his job. And now we were insolvent, meaning we didn't have any money. And we wanted to go out and buy some of these small little businesses in those days. Who's from the East Coast? Okay, a lot of you. Poland Spring, we bought that business for $3 million, bankrupt in 1980, came with 29 employees. That was the kind of stuff we could buy. It's $1 billion brand today, and it's probably worth $4 billion if you put it alone on the market from our portfolio, because it makes high margins. And so the other one was, you guys are all too young to know about this, but we had a recall on Perrier in 1990. All the Perrier, world's largest recall in the history of consumer products, global, all had to come off the market. There was a manufacturing process problem in the gas that went in. It was a natural gas that went into the water. It was normally filtered by charcoal. They forgot to change the filters. You had a little trace elements of benzene gas, but almost nothing. You get 10 times that much just standing next to your car while you're filling your gas tank up. But it wasn't supposed to be there. And it was a worldwide recall, and ended up costing the company hundreds of millions of dollars. It's what allowed Nestlé to buy the company in a hostile takeover. But I had to fire 1,500 people that next year out of 4,500 people, because if we hadn't, we would have lost $50 million. That was the hardest thing I ever did, along with having to work 18 hours a day to put the brand back into the market. We had 8 class action lawsuits. The FDA was suing us. The FTC was suing us. Commissioners of health in 20 states were suing us. And we had to put all this stuff back together again. And I had a lot of people who just caved in, couldn't do it. And I learned a lot about myself. It was one of my little mini PhDs I got. That's my crisis management PhD, along with my leadership PhD. But I got it from doing it. You got more questions? Keep going. One of you guys pinged me on LinkedIn, graduate student from South America. Who is it? In the room? He might have been in the other room this morning.
I mean, you mentioned these things happened in the 90s, in 93, as well as you mentioned that there were some personal issues going on in 93 as well. That would have made the situation tougher.
Pardon me? Do it again.
You mentioned that this happened in 93,
Yeah.
92.
Perry recall happened in 90.
So it was like 92, 93.
Nestlé bought the company in 92.
92, okay. And then you had some personal issues going on.
Oh yeah, I had some personal
at the same
issues.
time. So how
Yeah.
did you come over all these things?
Well, I went to work on, when I inherited this executive team that it made me dysfunctional. I had to do a couple of things. I took the first 360 in our company in 1993, and it wasn't great, as I said. But I internalized it. I knew I had to do something about me. I knew I had to do something about my team. I fired half of my executive team and started over again with people that I liked, trusted, and respected. And the other thing I did was I was married once before with no kids, and I got divorced. And met Will's mom, and 4 kids later, one of them's here. Changed my life totally. I married the wrong person. I got married to make somebody else happy versus making myself happy. There's another little life lesson in there, too. Let's get some more questions up here. Come on. Yeah.
Who's a leader today that you feel like best reflects the characteristics you were talking about in your presentation?
The right stuff? Another leader?
Yeah.
Boy, they're hard to find. Those of you from the East Coast, do any of you know Stu Leonard's Markets in Connecticut? Stu's been a friend of mine for 20 years. I'm on his family's board. He runs a great company. People love working there. And it's one of the greatest retail business models in the United States. It's huge farm stores. There's 6 of them now, about 100,000 square feet. And along with 8 wine stores, they do $500 million worth of business. He makes it fun for his employees to work there. And he's perennially on the Fortune best places to work for. But there aren't a lot of them out there. I mean, did you guys see in the news recently that the board and the CEO supposedly didn't know that there was an empty jet following Jeff Immelt around the world? Did you guys see the story on that? I mean, you almost can't believe that. Are you kidding me? That's shareholder money that's being used to ferry somebody around. I don't get it. At PepsiCo, Harvard Business School still does this every year, or not every year, every 5 years or so. They trot out an old story called Muscle Building, your employee group. And it was written by a guy named Andrew Pearson, who was the CEO of PepsiCo at one time. And here's what his vision of muscle building is. You take the bottom 10% out of the company every single year, regardless. I mean, how much fun is it to work there thinking that you might have the bullet on your back? I mean, I think, look, sometimes people have to go. But don't tell me every year you're going to take 10% out just because you can. So I honestly will tell you, I didn't read any leadership book. I read one leadership book on this, and it was a guy that I had working for me, speaking to my team. And he hit me with the different types of companies, the human assets-based and technology-based companies. But other than that, I didn't do any reading. My stuff is pretty much homegrown. I did have to hire a guy who worked with me on leadership development because my human resources VP didn't know how to do that. He was more of a technical human resources guy than a developmental senior human resources guy. That's not to say there aren't a lot of great companies being led by good people out there. I'm not telling you that. But my network, I don't see very many of them. I was in YPO for my chapters. My YPO forum is still together. I was in YPO in my 40s, Young Presidents Organization, and I didn't see a lot of great leadership in YPO. I think it's the exception rather than the rule to have companies that really, truly are willing to turn that pyramid upside down and serve their people. Any more? Yeah.
Spoke about several business strategies, about market share being like a EKG for a company. Would you mind touching on some of the other strategies that you?
I've got a simple thing. I think that if you have the best brand and the lowest cost of production and the best price, guess what? You win. You will always win with those 3 things. Very few companies have all those 3 things working at the same time for them, because to have the lowest cost of production, you have to be maniacal about how the internal workings of your company are. And you have to be willing to invest capital to make sure that you can continue to be the low-cost producer. There are a lot of old-line companies out there with what I call legacy assets that have been depreciated, that have been around for 40 or 50 years, and guess what? You just can't produce good stuff on those old assets. A great example would be, I'm on the board of the world's largest manufacturer of 100% recycled corrugate, secondary packaging, cardboard for packaging. Think about what's coming from Amazon every day at your home. The company's called Pratt Industries. They're a $4.7 billion, almost $5 billion corrugated company based in Melbourne, Australia. They have $2 billion worth of business in the United States. All of their mills are new. They didn't buy anybody else's stuff. The son of the founder of the company has built $2.5 billion in business in the United States, what we call greenfielding, by building new mills, up-to-date mills that are capable of making high-quality corrugate from lousy paper, but more importantly, with structural integrity so that you can lightweight the corrugate, pay less for it, and still get the job done in terms of whatever it is you're putting inside it staying safe. And it's this kind of capital investment that is truly important for America to be successful from a manufacturing standpoint. I'm a big proponent of cutting corporate taxes to 20% because it's going to allow, it's going to free up both capital expenditure money for new plants and assets, and it's also going to keep a lot more manufacturing here in the United States.
So if you're working at a company and you see the culture changing, or you want to move the culture of the company in a direction that you think would be more beneficial, as a young employee, how do you go about doing it?
You can't. I used to, I haven't done it for a number of years, but I used to come up to, towards the end of the year, of a business ethics class at Sacred Heart University up near where I live. And I would speak to graduate students who are out in the workforce every year. And invariably, these people liked their jobs, but they didn't really like who they were working for. And I had one student say to me one spring, I really believe in everything you're telling me. And I operate this way with my team, but the people at the top of the company don't seem to care. What should I do? And I said, I'm sorry to tell you, but you should leave. Because what I'm talking about cannot be executed from the middle of a company. It's got to be the belief of the top leadership of the company that this is how they're going to operate their company. And I'm sorry to say that because there's a lot of good people trying to do the right thing in companies today where the culture's going sideways sometimes, you know. And it's truly trickle down. It's like it's basically setting the standards, adhering to the standards, and having everybody in the company see and believe it. And it's got to come from the top. Any more? Yeah.
You spent a lot of effort building this culture. Somebody came in and placed you in 3 years.
Let me tell you the story. I'll tell you the story on it, okay? It wouldn't surprise you to know that an $85 billion company didn't really care who I thought should succeed me. But it turns out that I was able to get my chosen successor, who worked for me for 25 years, into the job. His name's Tim Brown. About 8 months ago, I got a call from a friend of mine who's a vice chairman of one of the largest recruiting firms in the country. And he said to me, I want to meet Tim Brown. I said, why? He said, because I have something he might be interested in. Well, it turns out that Tim is now the president of Chobani, which is a phenomenal company. If you have heard anything about Hamdi Ulukaya, who's a Kurdish Turk immigrant who was asked to leave Turkey when he was 20 years old because he got into human rights violations, came to the United States, didn't speak a word of English, has $1.5 billion yogurt company that he created himself, and is a really very interesting, nice person. Tim got the opportunity to go be entrepreneurial again in a company like that. He took it. They brought a guy in from Nestlé who had run the Purina pet care company in Latin America for the last 6 years and done a good job. Doesn't know the bottled water category, and unfortunately, there have been some people replaced from my executive team with people from Nestlé who might be decent people, have no real leadership skills, and the employees are not being treated properly today. And I'll just tell you one story. A week ago, 3 weeks ago, they terminated 90 people out of 450 people at the headquarters, and 4 of them were 20 to 40-year people. One of them celebrated her 40th anniversary at 63 years old the day after she was terminated, and walked out of the building with guards, not allowed to have an early retirement, None of these people were. They were terminated. They were given severance packages large enough to keep them from suing the company, but in my opinion, they should have sued them. And the optics for the other 400 people in this company, these people were iconic in the culture of the company. I'm not saying they didn't need to be retired, but the way they did it, I never walked anybody out of that company in my life. They had guards, they had human resources people there. You go back to your cubicle or your office and you put your stuff in a box and you leave. The optics of it were so awful that I was saying this morning, in the last year, I've had maybe 15 people ping me on LinkedIn. I've got over 100 a month later from people in my whole company. And it's taken 3 years with 4 members of the executive team who should be fired. It's taken 3 years for everything I built to just be completely trashed. And I'm dismayed about it, and I have to get over it because there's nothing I can do about it anymore. But I spent 35 years of my life there, and it's very hard. But look, this is how people think. Okay, wait a minute, somebody's going to go postal. Let's get some guards around here. I mean, come on. It's just not the right way to treat people. And you know, they weren't trying to be mean. They're just unconscious, ignorance. It's just ignorance. What else we want to talk about? Anything? We got it? Yeah.
Can you talk about your progression, jobs you've had?
Yeah.
Transition to
Yeah.
each job, your career progression?
So I started as a sales rep with Kraft Foods. I carried a bag in grocery stores for 4 years. I did not have an MBA. And I'm pretty much your prototypical C+ student in college as well. It just wasn't really my thing. I loved learning by doing, I guess, is the only answer I can give you. I didn't have an IQ test until I was about 35 years old. I didn't think I was very smart, frankly. I thought I'd just been getting by on good luck, you know. And so I carried a bag for Kraft Foods for 4 years. I went to PepsiCo. I was assistant to the regional manager for about 8 months there. Then I was in charge of food service fountain syrup sales in Chicago, and then I was put in charge of chain store sales on the parent company side. And my last job in Chicago was as the head of chain store sales for Pepsi, the Pepsi bottling group in Chicago. Then I went to Perrier. I was a central division manager for a year. They sent me out west to run the Western Division I basically, in that role, I franchised the Perrier business, set up a distribution network for 14 states. Then I went to the West Coast, and I did the same thing out there because the guy that was out there had made a mess of it. They fired him and sent me out there to fix it. A year later, I ended up as VP of Sales. 1987, I became VP of Sales and Marketing. 1991, I became COO. 1992, when Nestlé bought the company, I became CEO. And I thought I'd work for Nestlé for 2 years because I didn't think I was going to like it, and it ended up being 22 years. And I had a great run, a lot of autonomy, good relationships with 2 CEOs, and the story I'm telling you is not necessarily indicative of the company. Nestlé's populated with good people who are trying to do the right thing, but they're not real strong on leadership. They don't really understand what leadership is all about. They're the kind of people that if they've got a problem with you, they won't tell you for 20 years because they don't want to feel it's like it's hurting your feelings or something. But people need to know. People need to get good feedback so they can get better. That's why I said values-based leadership is not necessarily a soft thing. It can be a tough thing. People don't like hearing that stuff sometimes. And I had people working for me who simply would not internalize feedback, and then they end up not being able to work there anymore. Are we done? Just about that time, isn't it? Yeah, okay.
So you mentioned at the beginning of your lecture some parts of sustainability in the early 21st century. I was wondering what parts of the production, or like what areas of production were like in focus of the people who were attacking the sustainable issues and how you responded to those.
So my environmental journey started in 1980 when we bought Poland Spring. It came with a broken down Butler building that was 50,000 square feet, 500 acres of watershed area, and 29 employees. And that day, I realized that if we didn't take care of the spring source, we weren't going to have a business. So when I left, we had 14,000 acres of watershed land that we owned, protecting 50 springs. I had a full-time team of geologists, 10 geologists who did nothing but manage the sustainability of those spring sources. Because when we went out and put a $150 million plant on a piece of property, it doesn't come on wheels. You can't move it someplace else. You've got to do 100 years worth of land use work and make sure that the water coming from that spring is sustainable. We have some springs that have been giving us water in iterations of these companies for over 100 years. That's the first thing. That was okay for a long time, but then the environmentalism and the people who didn't think bottled water should have a license to operate its business took over, and they wanted to go after the bottle. Well, we were the pioneers of lightweighting our packaging. That little bottle that aggravates you sometimes because it's only 8 grams of plastic used to be 15. And my company has today now, after 10 years, saved 1 billion pounds of PET resin that no longer needs to go into that product. And it's 2.5 times lighter than a soft drink bottle of the same size. You're 20 grams with a soft drink bottle today for 20 ounces of liquid, and a bottled water bottle's 8. We were the first guys to pioneer lightweighting, and on top of that, we use about 35% of our energy use is from wind power. We have wind farms next to our plant in the desert in California. For Arrowhead, we use renewable water resources for a lot of our power in the northeastern United States. Our carbon intensity is very light. The bottle is 55% of our carbon intensity, and by lightweighting from 15 to 8, we've got a 25% absolute reduction in our carbon footprint. Bottled water has the lightest carbon footprint of any packaged beverage. The only liquid that has a lighter carbon footprint is tap water. And these are things that a lot of the pseudo-environmentalists have and I call them pseudo because most of the NGOs that we worked with wanted to help us get better. But organizations like Sierra Club and Corporate Accountability, they raise funds by poking their eye in companies, and they don't want to work with them to get better. They just want to raise money. And so those people have a narrative, but they're not entitled to their own facts. And the facts are that bottled water has not only been good for the environment, it's been good for human health the last 20 years. That's it. I want to thank you very much for great questions and for being here today.